is from July to December. In August, the election was called. The government was on autopilot then for about that month. So you had basically a month of earnest work. September 16th, we took over. The curfew immediately went to 12 o'clock. Things immediately started to loosen up. Business started to flourish. People could then put on 2 and 3 shifts of workers, and the economy started to run. But the side opposite would take credit for that, for the period from July to when the election was called. Well, you know, the Bahamian public can judge that. We were living before September 16th, and we can feel and know what we were living under. And we're living now in this New Day administration under Philip Brave Davis, and you can tell the difference. And so, no matter how many words you put on it, that's the fact. Now let me move quickly, because it's late in the evening, as time is passing. But I like to use the words of an 18th century poet and Baptist missionary of all things to India, in the person of William Ward. And the difference between this New Day administration and the one we replace is summed up in this. And these are the 4 steps to achievement. And this must be a Baptist preacher because there's alliteration here. The 4 steps are to plan purposely. The other side had plenty plans, so they could tick this box. They plan to do a whole heap of things. Prepare prayerfully. I'm not going to judge anybody's religion, so I assume that everyone prepares prayerfully. But here is where we part company with them. In these last 2 items, you have to proceed positively and pursue persistently. Amen. That is what we do that they do not do. And if you wanted to put it in Bahamianese, if you're in the Bahamas, you know, we say talk is cheap. Yeah. Money buy land. Yes. So, just in my ministry, because the Prime Minister entrusted the Ministry of National Security to me, in my ministry, let me show you some of the differences in why you need all 4. And just good planning and praying ain't enough. You know, the Bible says faith without works is dead. It's that kind of a thing. Firstly, when I assumed the chair, Marco's Alert, we had spent $3 million on that item. It wasn't ready for deployment. It hadn't been tested. And being pushed, and I have to admit this, Prime Minister, by your wife, being pushed by the spouse of the Prime Minister, we have now successfully tested with both providers, and subject to some tweaking with Apple, the system will be effective across every instrument, and the billboards will be up and working. That is the difference about planning and delivering. But it's only right that we deliver it, because Marco's Alert was a promise of the late Dr. B.J. Nottage to the family of Marco Archer, and it was very good to have them there when BTC tested at the ministry. Difference between planning, and the member for Tall Pines would be aware of this, the COVID tracking app. When we came to office, in the midst of a pandemic, as the other side likes to say, there was a COVID tracking application provided by a Bahamian company, a local Bahamian company. Up to the point that we took over, we had paid $86,861 on the app, out of a complete contract price of $131,000 plus. It had never been used. The contract was executed in March of 2021. In September of 2021, it had never been used. What is worse, there were no standard operating procedures. There were no meetings between health and the police and COVID enforcement, even to work out how the app would be used. And we had paid close to $90,000 for it, an app that was supposed to help us keep safe. So the talk about we just assume projects that we met in place and finished them, that is true. A lot of it is the case. If you don't know what you're doing, we will finish it for you. The next example is the most troubling one, Prime Minister, and we have to pray over this one. And this is the drone project. Because on assuming office, the other side had spent $15 million on the acquisition of drones. And I had a very troubling meeting on this. I'm learning patience, Prime Minister. I know you think I'm impatient. I'm learning patience now from you. But here is what we meant, to tell you the level of incompetence. We contracted for a submersible, an unmanned submersible, that has no grabber arm to pick up anything, that has a camera that has questionable resolution, is rated to go down 600 feet, but we got 150 feet of cable. Let me repeat that. Our submersible is rated to go down 600 feet, and the other side managed to get it with 150 feet of cable. We have quad and hex drones that are ones that are supposed to fly out from the nest at the police station responding to shot spotter. The other side managed to have a system where the radio frequency that the drones operate on conflicts with the CCTV, the frequency of the police CCTV system. And so the vendor is trying to get an additional $200,000 for antennas to fix that. Well, I'm a lawyer, and I have told them if they can give me a legal opinion where that's my problem, then they stand to be paid. But they were well on the way of getting an additional $200,000 for delivering drones whose radio frequency conflicts with the CCTV. Prime Minister, I told them not a possible chance that I will be paying it. And so, very simple. Doesn't get any better. The prison asked for a tethered drone, got a blimp. A blimp that is filled with flammable hydrogen instead of inert helium. A blimp that can only operate properly if there is no breeze. So on the assumption that nobody shoots it down, which is very possible, it can only be used for maximum maybe 20, 30 days out of the entire year. But we paid for that. The Bahamian people paid for that. So that's what we found with this technology. It is useful, it is necessary, and when we fix it, they'll say, we took their idea and just cut and paste. We'll be cutting and pasting when we fix the submersible. We'll be cutting and pasting when we fix this blimp. We'll be cutting and pasting when we fix the quad and hex copters and get them to work properly. Yes, Central. We will cut and paste and fix y'all's problems. It's what good people do. Now, Prime Minister, as I say, you're a hard taskmaster. Your wife is a harder taskmaster than you. And it's been my privilege to work with her, and she's driven us. Marcos Alert is finished. The Sexual Offenders Register, subject to some legal issues, are finished. The acting commissioner, the acting commissioner of police deigned to say that the intimate partner violence unit would be set up in CDU. And Mrs. Davis said, no, it can't possibly be set up in CDU. So when we come for some more money, Minister of Finance, it'll be because the spouse has determined, and I think correctly so, that persons with domestic violence, with intimate partner violence, should come to a place that would be conducive for them. In her judgment, it wouldn't be CDU, and I don't have any argument to dissuade her from that, and I suspect that she will get what she and her team are asking for. Yes. Now, yes. What happened to the crime plan? I had it under there. Yes. Kalani, yesterday said crime is spiking. He says, what is our plan? And this is the problem that I have with the other side, When you've it's right there. When you've lost, it's very easy to say, you should be nice to people. You shouldn't fire people. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. Well, when you were in government, my predecessor pointed out correctly that the Minister of National Security isn't supposed to have a crime plan. Our act and our Constitution makes policing an independent function, and so the Commissioner of Police produces every year a crime plan. And he's produced one here that we, as the political directorate, have to support him. And it happens that it aligns with the blueprint for change. Just as it happens that on the day that I was sworn in, the commissioner saw fit to undo the injustice committed against current Deputy Commissioner Fernanda, Assistant Commissioner Delaveau, and Assistant Commissioner Strawn under the last administration, taking talented police officers off the front line for a reason yet unknown. These were officers who had worked in reducing crime and murder to the lowest rate ever. For some reason, it was determined that they were to be cycled out. I put it down to the government because in the new day, they came back without me even asking for them to come back. Yes. So it was clear that their cycling out was recognized as wrong. And I hope I don't overstep in saying this. And again, St. Anne's, you weren't in this because you weren't in the government last time. But it would be fair to say that it had to be political pressure for that to happen if a change of government results in it being undone, even before the minister takes the chair. Just as the parading of persons before the cameras must have been recognized to be wrong, because that was done without it even being sought to be done. And this is what we are talking about, respecting people and respecting their rights. But let me be very clear about this. Crime is a problem. By the time the police are involved, we have failed. Somebody has committed a crime. My primary focus will be to look at ways that we can stop people failing. So I'll be working with West End. I'll be working even with Garden Hills. I'll be working with Angliston as we seek to put in place programs that will prevent our young people failing and falling into the trap. As mandated by the Prime Minister, once you have failed, that's not the end. We will be working at your rehabilitation.
Yes.
And putting proper steps in place so that our prison can be certified as a correctional institution.
Wow.
It cannot be certified at this time before this New Day government is 3/4 through its term. That is our objective, for it to be certified as a correctional institution. Because as Commissioner Clare likes to remind us, 98% of the people in prison will come out. And so you can have all the plans in the world, but as is pointed out, may I have a few minutes to wrap, Ms. Deputy? As has been pointed out, all the plans in the world matters not. Faith without works is dead. I give you credit for having a lot of faith. What I criticize isn't your faith. What I criticize is your work. We undertake to the Bahamian people that we will work tirelessly to make sure that relief comes, and that relief comes in the shortest possible time. Thank you for the time, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Freetown, I love you.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
The final speaker for in this debate, I should like to move for the House to exceed its business beyond 7 o'clock, Mr. Deputy. If I can get a second.
It has been moved and seconded that the House be moved past 7 p.m. As many are in favor remain seated. Those opposed will rise. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador.
Deputy, first of all, let me just thank everyone for participating in this lively and provocative exchange. Discourse on the midterm budget statement. Before I address some of the, before I get into my substantive response, just perhaps speak to two things that I omitted to capture in this. One, I heard at least 2 or 3 members opposite speak to us looking to what other countries have been done to sort of address the issue of the inflation. And I think much emphasis, at least 2 or 3 have mentioned Barbados and how Barbados had, in fact, reduced VAT on many items, had decreased the cap on gas and diesel. I think you all remember that, you know.
Yes.
You all remember that? Well, you know, it's one thing to point out what other countries may or may not have done. And yes, it is true that Barbados did propose some zero rating of certain personal care and critical items. Yes, they did cap prices on and reduce the VAT payable on gas and diesel. But they didn't just do that. So I wonder, you recommended that we do that. That we should look at those things and do it. I wonder if you'll recommend that we also add what they call a pandemic contribution levy for example, do you recommend, as Barbados did, levying 15% on the net income of corporations? And this applies to domestic businesses, retail, sale, petroleum products as well. You see, they reduce that on petroleum products, but on the corporations, they've added 15%. Do you recommend we do that? Well, let's ask another question. Would you recommend that we in addition, that's corporation, that we add 1% on individuals earning in excess of, say, $3,000 a month? Would you recommend that?
The chair recognizes the honourable member for St. Anne's.
And that, that's in Barbados. They have income tax.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm just a little confused because question time has been adjourned to take place today. I'm wondering if we've started it now, because normally it's the Leader of the Opposition that gets the first question. If it hasn't started now, I appreciate that we are in the spirit.
It has to be relevant to the point of order.
This is a point of clarification.
Relevant to the
Questions are being put to our side.
In a debate.
Realize the question time has begun.
And it's not the point of order.
Question time is coming. Okay.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Carolyn.
Well, Sir Hans, I just thought to draw your attention. The questions are, what do they call it? Rhetorical? Is that what they say? And because it's one thing to suggest that we on this side are not looking at ways and means of addressing the inflationary period that we are undergoing. And then you say, look what Barbados is doing. This is what they're doing. This is what the country did. But you just don't leave it like that.
No context.
So you have to put it in the whole context. Barbados introduced at the same time a 15% corporation tax on its companies. At the same time, Barbados introduced a 1% contribution, they call it. They're calling it a pandemic contribution. They're not adding it to their income tax. They're not adding it to VAT. It's just as a separate tax. They call it a levy, a pandemic levy of 1% on earnings of their salary of workers. 1%. So when you suggest these things, I have to ask you, do you want me to consider those? Do you want me to consider that? Do you want me to consider these too? And it ain't just end there, It just didn't end there. Natural gas, right? The cooking gas. That went up as well. See, I have it right here. And so don't just, now I must confess, I very often, when I'm speaking about the pandemic challenges that we're experiencing, and I was of the view that very often you all looked at countries that were failing rather than those countries that were succeeding, to pull from them what I call the best practices to employ here. And in fact, I did raise Barbados as one of those countries you might wish to look at. But I did it in the context. I just didn't tell you, look, I look at it in the context of the results for what they would have implemented.
The chair
And
recognizes.
other things as well.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Marco
You want me to
City.
yield or this a point of order?
Is this a point of order?
Huh?
Yes, point of order.
Point of order? Yes, point of order.
No, sorry, I normally clarify with the chair, not with
Yeah,
you.
the chair.
You're right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. For the member for Cat Island, Rum Key, San Salvador is talking about context as if there is no context. Mr. Let me finish the point.
What am I misrepresenting?
You are misrepresenting
What am I
that the suggestions that may I have?
Yeah, let Marco City have the floor.
Okay. During the time we were in office, Cat Island, Rum Key, San Salvador, we looked at best practices across CARICOM and hemispherically. So when members shared suggestions with the government, they were simply saying, Cat Island, Rum Key, San Salvador, they were simply saying to you that there are best practices within the jurisdiction that you can take a look at. So this point that you're making, hammering in as if we are not mindful of context, is disrespectful. We are mindful of context. We're simply saying that you're the government, you are the government, that you are the government. Let's not get technical. Let me just make the point and then allow him to go. And allow him to continue.
Members, yeah, Marco City, are you wrapping up? Marco City, are you wrapping up?
Fort Charlotte.
Marco City, members, are you wrapping up?
No, I am. I'm not sure why he needs to defend a brave. I mean, he's breaking down it himself. Allow us to have a conversation.
The chair recognizes the member for Fort Charlotte.
Mr. Deputy Speaker,
Thank you.
if the honourable member wants to make a rebuttal point, he should ask the member to yield.
Which I did.
And the honourable member, the Prime Minister asked him, do you wish me to yield? He said, no point of order.
Marco City.
But he is not raising a point of order.
He's rebutting.
He cannot point to any of these provisions because they don't allow rebuttal. That's what the honourable member's doing. He's been here for a long time.
And he knows the rules.
He should know the rules. This is a debate. Use the rules.
Marco City, Fort Charlotte has the. Yeah.
What's your point of order?
Best practices were being recommended, and since we came to a debate, Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador, colleagues were recommending to you that in such a debate, they're expecting the Ministry of Finance, the Prime Minister, would look at best practices to address inflation. That is the only point that is being made, and that's our recommendation. It's not a contentious point. We're simply saying, what are other countries doing? When you sit with your colleagues who are ministers of finance, how are they addressing inflation that might be helpful to the Bahamian people? That's the only point. That's the only point I'm raising.
Well, it's not truly a point. It's what the member is saying is now that I have pointed out to them, that quite apart from the fact that they see, it wasn't put in the context that it was not put in the context that they were saying to us, we are not doing these things. We are not doing anything to help. That's the allegation. That is the suggestion. That's the assertion. I mean, I remember the member from Kalani talking about. Remember Kalani saying, basically calling me an enemy of the poor. What I'm doing to the poor. Right, and the suggestion is we should do this 1%. This 1%. So what is disrespectful? What is disrespectful? What is disrespectful is to leave hanging out there that other countries are doing these things and we are not doing these things, and not telling the Bahamian people as well the whole story. That yes, they're doing these things, but look what else they're doing.
Yes.
And that's the point I'm making. That's the point I'm making. That's the point I make, Mr. Speaker. That's the point I make.
Minister was doing it.
That's the point I make, Mr. Speaker. And I just, I leave it there. Right. So,
That should be an appropriate analogy.
Mr. Speaker, another point I'd like to address that the member spoke to, he was quoting, I think he was quoting a statement from the central bank on the bond issues and the bonds not being taken up fully, etc. All right, now that has not been anything new for the last 2 to 3 years. If you check the continuous history on how bonds have been performing in respect to the local market, you'll see that has been a challenge. Banks have been loath to take long-term bonds. They've been trying to short it. And now the issue was exacerbated after September 16th, not because of anything that we would have done, but rather because, you remember, I think the election was September 16th, and I think it was September 17th that we got the downgrade, the news of the downgrade. Remember that?
Yes, sir. They knew it.
You know, those things impact the market and how people respond to your bond issues. But if you look at the bond issues in the last 2 months, etc., you see it's been stabilized and was keeping and maintaining the levels that's comparable to all other bonds by any other jurisdiction. Just check it.
But how do you
check it.
go back to the market?
Yeah.
And attract the required resources for the finance?
Yes, and we are doing it. You are criticizing the repo.
I'm asking you a question.
Yes. I'm just demonstrating.
I'm saying you are not preparing for bond offer. That's my understanding, that locally you are not preparing for bond offer.
Oh, you understood that from?
Ministry of Finance.
I see.
But it's the Minister of Finance.
Yeah. Speaker, let me just see I can right the ship a bit. All right? I'll right the ship a bit. There's some other issues, things they said, but I'll leave that for another time. But let me just right the ship a bit. Both at the beginning of my presentation of mid-year budget statement and in opening the ensuing debate, I made the point of clarifying the role and purpose of the statement. It's worth saying again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the mid-year statement provides the Bahamian people with information about the government's fiscal performance against the budget targets at the midpoint of the fiscal year. It's not a budget statement. It is not an announcement of new policy positions. It is not future focused to the extent that it must necessarily set out how the government has been performing during the period being reported. That's not necessary. And so I say again, the mid-year budget statement provides the Bahamian people with information about the government's fiscal performance against the budget targets at the midpoint of the fiscal year. That's what it is. The period covered by my statement runs from July 21st to December 2021. The previous administration was not ejected from office until 16th of September 2021. And so the reporting period covers some of their time in office. I also repeat the point that this year's statement is particularly noteworthy because it is the first time in several years that it is being produced without the constraints of the emergency orders. Given that the previous administration refused to give any credible account of their spending during the past few years, the statement takes on greater import and urgency. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the mid-year budget statement is not merely a courtesy. It's not a courtesy. The Bahamian people have a fundamental and legal right to know how their money has been spent. I think that is accepted by Marco City. They have a right to know what the government has said and done in their name. And they have a right to know how far those actions are in line with what the government has promised. Therefore, it is profoundly regrettable that members opposite have had so little to say in reply to the many, many questions which were raised in my statement during the debate. They have uttered barely a word in defense of the many, many questionable practices which were undertaken by the administration, including and especially those of the member of Kalani who acted as the sole competent authority since March 2020. Chaired on.
Untrue.
With the full support.
Untrue.
I say you, you know.
Untrue.
I say you, man. Chaired on. With the full support of his team, whose evident spinelessness still beggars belief.
You were the exception.
Is this a point of order? The chair recognizes the honorable member from Marco City.
Mr. Deputy.
Yes, sir.
This is an example of the duplicity of the other side. The member for Fort Charlotte would have transformed himself into a pauper jack, jumping up for unparliamentary language. Unparliamentary language.
Marco City.
Unparliamentary language. I would ask you to withdraw. Yeah, the same one that you just said.
Oh, please. I said a lot just now.
You said a lot?
Yeah,
You're a brilliant man. The one that Fort Charlotte would have gotten up to protest. I said it about you.
No, I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't know that.
Is it okay that I call your colleague spineless?
Oh, that's what
I'm asking you, is it okay that I do that? I'm just asking, because if people play that by that rule.
If they are,
If they are?
Yeah, if they are, I will not.
Right, so then that becomes a matter of definition.
Sorry, if I'm asking him what he wants me to do.
Like I told you, I wish for you to not only withdraw it, I wish you to have it struck from the record, Mr. Deputy. It is inappropriate. We don't need to go down that road because there are many terms we could use to describe each other.
All right.
And I'd rather us not
Honorable
descend
member, are you
or
going to withdraw
condescend to
it?
that level.
Huh?
Are you going to withdraw?
Withdrawn.
It's withdrawn.
There you go.
You just gotta repeat the word you want me to withdraw, you know. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the abuse of the emergency orders, the abuse of the emergency orders was the original sin. Under the emergency orders, the government was required to submit a report detailing expenditures, but the FNM government never complied. They never complied. And you'd have heard the member from Freetown citing the various provisions of the rules that required him to. But he never did. That's why I keep saying a lot of the conversations that attracted attention on that side and from this side would have been so unnecessary had they complied. That's what happened. That's what I miss. That's what I miss. I had a note to talk about that. The procurement bill. Mr. Deputy Speaker, first of all, we do not accept that we are in breach of the Procurement Act. Nor do I accept that I'm above the law. In fact, I'm a proponent and have always been that the rule of law is rule of law. Rule of law. The rule of law is something that binds me. Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying is that I don't deny that. What is interesting, what is interesting is that bill was passed in March 2021. Look at it now. Those who are listening, look at it. It was passed in March 2021. And guess what?
Before the election.
Guess what? Guess what? Let me just tell you this. When the elections were called,
16.
no, in August. When the election was called in August, right?
Yes.
In August, when the elections were called, guess what? We were ready. The Progressive Little Party was ready. And guess what? And guess what? Guess what? They were so astounded. They said, well, what happened? We thought we caught them off guard. They look more ready than us. And surely we look more ready than them. Right? They look like they were more ready for this than us. Right? But you know, there's something called reading the tea leaves. You see what they're doing. What they're not doing.
You really meant it?
And they weren't doing. And the next thing you know, when we were debating the procurement bill, we were telling them that, look, you need your regulations, the rules, because these provisions require guidance. It requires to have, some of the provisions are not workable. I'm saying, we said these things to them. Now, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker. So what happened now? What happened now, Mr. Deputy? So now what happened?
I rise on a point of order.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
The member for Kent Island, Rumkey, in Salvador, by not filling in the blanks is inadvertently misleading the public. If I recall correctly, you sat on this side and you voted for a piece of legislation that you're now discussing. Your team voted for the piece of legislation that was peer reviewed internally within the Bahamas and internationally. So I'm asking, am I wrong? I'll sit. Did your team vote for the procurement bill?
Honorable member, no, this is not a question and answer period. Either you rise on a point of order.
How does that become a point of order? How does that become a point of order?
I'm suggesting that you are misleading the public.
Okay, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Thank you. I never said we did not vote for the bill, So I don't know how that becomes a point of order, that we voted for the bill. I never said we did not vote for the bill. I said that the bill, right, we criticized the bill, right? We criticized the bill, pointing out some issues with the bill, and we indicated as well that it was being rushed, because it came in 1 week and we're debating it the next week. Now, I know nothing about any internal review. I know nothing about any external review. The point I'm making here is you passed it in March, and then sometime, then you say it ain't gonna come in effect until September. And when I look at that bill, I say now, look here now. You know something? They really serious with this bill. Because if they were serious, they would have brought it in before the election. And it gave me a signal. This bill is such, they don't want to live with this bill. They can call the election sometime before the bill will be enforced. And then if they win it, then they come back and do something with the bill. That's what I talk about, the tea leaves. That was the tea leaves. No, so, Mr. Speaker, so what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, so I'm saying, I deny not complying with the bill. That's your view. I say I'm not. And I'm not doing so because the bill, as in its present form, is unworkable. There are no regulations to assist you in understanding it. That's your interpretation, and that's and I move on that, Speaker. Speaker, we had a Prime Minister, Speaker.
What is the point of order?
The point of order is that the Prime Minister the member for Kent Island, just made a point about the procurement bill that's absolutely inaccurate. The bill calls for individual entities to report on their contractual arrangements that they're entering into. The regulations does not prevent, let me finish the point. The regulations does not prevent water and sewage, BPL, or any other corporation from reporting the contracts. It doesn't prevent them. So how does the absence of regulations,
Yes.
how does the absence of regulations...
Marco City,
yes.
Address your comments to me.
Mr. Deputy Chair, I fail to see how the absence of regulation, which the member for Kent Island put on the public record, that this is what it is unworkable because there are no regulations. If you look at I think it's Article 61. If you look at Article 61, you would see.
Is that a point of order or opinion?
There is no requirement of the regulations that prevent any corporation from explaining who they sign contract with. You can use an Excel spreadsheet on Microsoft
Member,
Word.
are you getting to your point of order or your opinion?
The point of order is the Prime Minister makes the point.
It's not a point of order.
I'm sorry?
Marco City, you addressed it to me.
The point of order is the Prime Minister is indicating that the regulations are not in place, hence he is unprepared to be compliant with the law. You said it's not workable. What did you say, sir? What did you say?
Okay, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Kent Island.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I'm saying is this, right? I hear what the minister, his thing is that we're supposed to be disclosing and reporting on contracts issued by the government. I don't deny that is a provision of the bill, but that is not the only provision. That is tied to other provisions. There's other things so he's cherry picking an item out of the bill to talk about. I'm saying that Mr. Speaker,
Marco City, the member for Kent Island have the floor.
That's your interpretation of the bill. I deny it. And so let's move on. We have a Prime Minister.
Listen, members.
Never comply.
One second. This is becoming very childish. So you're going to finish, and anybody else have anything to say after? Then you can, because we wouldn't get out here tonight, and it's getting late. So let the Prime Minister finish. Let the honorable member for Kent Island finish.
Thank you.
Once he is finished, Marco City and St. Anne's, then you can speak. That's my ruling.
Thank you.
Remember, you have the floor.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, so I'm saying we had a Prime Minister spending the Bahamian people's money outside the procurement process, picking favorites and throwing millions around without having to detail or debate or defend his decisions. The right question is not how he was able to avoid following the law. That's easy. He had a compliant Attorney General and a weak, complicit cabinet. The right question has always been why? Why was he so determined to operate in the darkness? The answer is that a party that must have used the words transparency and accountability a million times in their sanctimonious statements wanted to shield themselves from these very things. What were they so ashamed of? If they're doing so well by the Bahamian people, why were they not proud to proclaim it? They seemingly spent many hours devising regulations governing the minutiae of the lives of the Bahamian people. Remember those COVID measures? Their aggressive incompetence that often resulted in chaos and confusion made the experience of the pandemic much worse than it had to have been. We well remember the crazy surname lettering system that led to crowds of people named Roland Smith lining up for hours outside food stores. Some elderly people I know collapsed in the heat. We well remember the heartless closing of the borders to Bahamians, while foreigners seemed free to be able to travel, even to bury their dog or do whatever. We well remember the reckless opening of the borders in August 2020 that led to the worst COVID surge that the country had experienced, with the number of hospitalizations and deaths skyrocketing. And we well remember how ordinary Bahamians were arrested, fined, and in some cases imprisoned for even the tiniest of infraction of the emergency order, while F&Ms and their rich friends partied at weddings or wherever they felt like. We will never forget, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the heartbreaking way that young man was treated for getting water from the pump to clean up after his grandfather. Mr. Deputy Speaker, and then last August, we had a situation in which an F&M government was going to the Bahamian people to ask them for 5 more years. And yet, they will not come clean on their spending during the pandemic. In their wisdom, the Bahamian people made an obvious inference. In their wisdom, the Bahamian people made an obvious inference. The F&M administration would not reveal the details of that spending because they were ashamed to reveal the details of that spending. And now we know why. If we wanted to see them in their best light, the best that could be said about the F&M's handling of the pandemic spending is that it was aggressively incompetent. Incompetent, uncompassionate, and whenever faced with a choice, they chose to benefit themselves and their wealthy friends over ordinary Bahamians. Mr. Deputy Speaker, their behavior was systematic and intentional, which is why it raises so many questions. Large sums unaccounted for, running at least into hundreds of millions of dollars of the Bahamian people's money. Unqualified, inexperienced individuals chosen to run organizations, departments, and projects. Spectacularly unqualified people awarded big contracts, sometimes for work of questionable value, and sometimes for work which appears never to have been done. Record keeping, which was completely absent or messy, and structures set up completely outside of the public service, with no level of reporting or accountability to anyone. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Bahamians are right to be worried about sins worse than incompetence, because there's a common sense question that sits at the heart of this. If the spending was so defensible, if the work done was so laudable, why didn't the F&M administration disclose and defend it? Then we all could have joined in and sung their praises, and we would not be having these conversations today. Mr. Deputy Speaker, their shyness may also have had something to do with the flimsy and laughable excuse offered for why they didn't need to comply with the law. The same government that recited the words transparency and accountability as many times as they could said they didn't need to report spending details. They said they could avoid the ordinary procurement rules, although they never actually made an order that they be avoided. And the whole thing, the whole time, not a single person, the whole time, Mr. Deputy Speaker, not a single person in the Minister's Cabinet, including the current leader of the F&M, had the courage, the testicular, that's what they say? Fortitude. Now that's parliamentary.
Yes, it is.
I will use it or you can continue.
Yeah. To stand up on behalf of the Bahamian people and say what was obvious, that what they were doing was wrong. It wasn't moral, it wasn't legal, it was wrong. Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, during this debate, the deafening silence continues. If there are innocent explanations to be made, they would have been provided. But neither the former Prime Minister nor the leader of the opposition denies the facts. I say the facts. Don't mind all the huffing and puffing. Making noise ain't the same thing as making an argument. I repeat that.
That's correct.
Making noise ain't the same thing as making an argument.
That's right.
Notice what they didn't do. Notice what they didn't do. They didn't deny the failure to disclose their spending. They didn't deny any of the relevant facts related to the spending. In respect to the food assistance program, they have not sought to answer anything about how $53 million of the Bahamian people's money was spent. No more flimsy excuses. No more flimsy excuses about accounting errors. Who received the funds? Who are funds passed on to? Where is the proof of what was spent on food for hungry Bahamians? How much were people being paid in salary and expenses? Why was the public service and every other experienced major organization excluded? I remind you, we wouldn't be having these conversations and discussions if they had done what they were supposed to do. To compare the almost $5 million in administration fees to that paid to large NGOs and other established organizations is laughable. The chairwoman of the Food Task Force, Mrs. Susan Holovesco-Larson, was being paid a salary in addition to the administration fees. And I didn't know, she was also paid another sum to hire a personal assistant. She was also paid, which was also, what is laughable, is that she was paid $30 a week as gas allowance. And they weren't running a building. They didn't have large overheads. So what happened to the almost $5 million, they say, administration fees? Almost. See, we need to understand this. See, we just see a statement speaking to, we see a statement, you see, and it's only, we're only trying to understand,
Let me understand.
But to get it to understand, and to get you to at least cooperate with us. Because if you don't cooperate, I got talk more.
Yeah, I'm talking.
Right? Who decided after a friendly chat that Canoe should be awarded a travel health visa contract? Who decided to open a separate bank account for them? Who allowed them to hang on to approximately $35 million of Bahamian people's money for more than 6 months? So that the auditor had to opine errors, fraud, and irregularities could possibly go undetected because of the lack of reconciliation. That's what the auditor had to say. As I said in House yesterday, we only have their word for it, that they've handed over all the funds. This may well be the case, but we have no evidence to support it right now. Many questions, many unanswered questions remain in relation to this health travel visa scheme, especially in relation to the millions given to an insurance company. For now, we'll leave that for another day. But soon enough, the truth will emerge of what transpired so that we know just how friendly those chats were. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the slush fund that was being run out at the Parks and Beaches Authority.
That you started.
Yeah.
That you started.
It's already starting to unravel. Even since my statement in the House last week, several memories and consciences appear to have been pricked. Some people seem to recall signing documents in other people's names, and others seem to remember not having done any work for contracts they were awarded. That's what's coming up now since then. I must confess that I still haven't quite recovered. I must confess, and I don't know whether you have, but I haven't quite recovered from the member for Kalani's stunning admission yesterday that he regularly, you know what I'm saying? He regularly uses 3 different signatures.
One verification.
Huh?
You got 3 personalities.
As the erstwhile Prime Minister, Minister of Health, and Minister of Finance, I shudder to think of the proliferation of signatures on public documents. I hope that this does not cause him difficulty in the future, when he may be asked to say more about this unusual and pioneering practice. Mr. Deputy Leader, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for members of an administration which has so little to show for their 4 years in government, they remain amazingly incapable of shame or regret. Crying in front of one's own supporters is not enough. Telling the poor people of this country that you would have looked out for them next time is not enough. The previous administration left the country with a level of suffering among the Bahamian people at an unprecedented all-time high. I'd just like to repeat some things. The shock increase in VAT by 60% placed enormous pressure on Bahamian individuals, businesses, and households, and consumer spending contracted. Before Hurricane Dorian, before COVID-19, government borrowing and interest payments had skyrocketed, which led to a tight squeeze on government spending. Debt was at 100% of GDP, which is to say that we were spending more, much more. Right? We were borrowing more than the size of our economy. Unemployment had risen with a consequent rise in misery. There had been no major investment in the economy, and a number of historically bad deals meant that the government was losing millions of dollars on white elephants, such as Grand Lucane Hotel. Many families and businesses continued to suffer from the impact of Hurricane Dorian. Very little relief had been provided to those who had lost so much, and the Disaster Reconstruction Agency appears to have been a disaster. Citizens, business, and employees continue to suffer from the stranglehold placed on them by irrational government policies and measures in response to COVID-19 pandemic. And public infrastructure was crumbling with not a single new major road, school, or clinic, not even a house constructed, not one. Since the member for Kalani places such great store by quotes in the Nassau Guardian, I'm happy, and I know, don't object until I finish. Since the member of Kalani places such great store by quotes in the Nassau Guardian newspaper, I'm happy to quote and adopt an extract from that same paper that he placed much store in, that was published yesterday. The Nassau Guardian of Wednesday the 16th. They printed boldly in black and white. And what they say? For the avoidance of any doubt. They didn't want you to have any doubt but this now. For the avoidance of any doubt, we will state categorically our opinion that Minnis was the worst prime minister in this country's history. His refusal to accept responsibility for his bad decisions, eclipsed only by his penchant for pettiness, paranoia, and igniting ire.
One second, I'll remember. Just let him, just let him finish. Just let him finish.
Let him finish the
Then-
quote.
Yeah, just let him. Yeah. No, you still have the floor, member.
No, you have to finish before
No, you have the floor.
3316.
Pardon me? Sorry? Pardon me?
16.
Pardon me?
These are insulting words.
16.
Worst Prime Minister in our history.
No, yeah.
No, that's
Truth. No.
Those words, that is not honorable language for the House of Assembly.
Okay, now.
Member from Fort Charlotte.
Sir Nance.
no. Talk to the rules. This has
Sir
talk
Nance.
to the rules.
3316, a member shall not use offensive, abusive, or insulting words about either House of Parliament or any member thereof.
No, Mr.
Calling a prime minister the worst prime minister in history, that is insulting. Insulting. Abusive.
You sat
Honorable
there.
members.
Insulting.
Mr. Nance.
I ask that they be strucken from the
You
record.
sat there
All right,
and allowed.
Mr. Deputy, the member for St. Anne's, you know, there's when you speak the truth hurts. And I accept that. Just like when you insult someone, that could be hurt too. So I know sometimes you confuse the truth with insult. And though both could hurt, as you may now be hurt by the opinions expressed in the Guardian. What do you want me to do with this?
The Tribune a moment ago, and now he's referring to the Guardian. Which publication is it? But in any event, he adopted them as his own words. And we've had no prime minister in the history of the Commonwealth of Bahamas that has led this nation through a Category 5 disaster, that has led this nation through a pandemic the scale of a global shutdown. It is not fair to categorize this past prime minister as the worst in the history
I didn't
of this
recognize you to be on the floor. I already made my ruling. I want him, the honorable member for Cat Island, to finish. Once he's done, then you can have the floor.
Yeah, and I could.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So I'll just. So you'll come back and invite me to withdraw this or something. So you know, like I said, the truth hurts, insult hurts. And I know you're hurt, but you know,
I'm happily married.
the truth. The member for St. Anne's is happily married, and I, you know, I've always wished you the best. Wish you the best. And so I'm just, you know, the member loves, you know, he put much stock in the Guardian. And he decided that he'll quote it extensively as it relates to me. I've done so now, and whatever the consequence follows. But you know, I should just repeat it just in case when they come back, so we'll know what we're going to be dealing with if they have a response to it.
Yes, sir.
And what the quote says, for the avoidance of doubt, of any doubt, we will state categorically our opinion that Menace was the worst prime minister in this country's history. His refusal to accept responsibility for his bad decisions, eclipsed only by his penchant for pettiness, paranoia, and igniting ire. Mr. Deputy Speaker, compare this to some of the things that our New Day administration has achieved in just 6 short months. Now, you know, ordinarily you'd want to compare their first 6 months with our first 6 months. But there's nothing to compare because, you know, they went on vacation. They went on vacation. But that the country knows of what we have done in just 6 short months.
Yes.
And much more to go.
Yes, sir.
And you note where each of our efforts reaching the little man.
That's right.
That's where we're headed. So listen to them. We have reduced VAT to 10% on everything. We have removed the punishing cost of the travel visa for Bahamians. We have introduced free testing for COVID. We have distributed hundreds of thousands of free medical grade masks. We have expanded capacity at the hospital by hiring additional nurses and doctors. We have introduced public reforms and settled outstanding promotions and regularization of contracts. A Ministry of Education task force has been established to address learning loss of our young people during the pandemic. We have successfully reopened schools. We have become more compliant regarding our obligations concerning climate change and signed on to international agreements that will enable us to access more support to make our country more resilient. We have made a $500 lump sum pandemic bonus payment to unemployed individuals. We did that in December. We have increased pensions for members of the public service. We have launched a virtual visitation program at the Department of Corrections. We continue to hold weekly press briefings and cabinet briefings for the media. We don't chase them, we don't run them.
In style.
The Department of Immigration has recruited 175 young Bahamians, which is the largest recruitment exercise in the history of the department. The new airport terminal at Ragged Island was opened. We signed a memorandum of understanding, right, to enhance technical cooperation and movement of persons with the government of the Bahamas and the United Arab Emirates. The government has partnered with the private sector to offer cash incentives for COVID vaccinations. We signed a new head of agreement for a $200 million resort for Cotton Bay Holdings in Saudi Lutra to create 500 jobs. We have reopened the straw market for the first time in nearly 20 months. We have launched industry discussions on implementing a national trade policy. We have broken ground for new housing communities in New Providence and and we have signed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, since coming to office, we have signed over $1 billion in new investments for this country. All this we have done in just 6 months. Here's what we are working to produce in the short term: to build affordable housing and provide options to rent to own, to launch the RISE program to support those in need and to assist in counteracting the inflationary measures that the inflation that we are now suffering, and young people, particularly our vulnerables. We are making progress on increasing the minimum wage. We intervene to stop BPL from raising prices and are continuing to work to keep energy prices under control. We will continue to ensure enforcement of price controls. We will centralize the importance of BAMSI and food security. And we will introduce new tools in the fight against crime. Mr. Deputy Speaker, despite the early signs that the measures that we are introducing will have positive effect on the economy, wider forces in the global economy are likely to present challenges. The inflationary pressures caused by the squeeze on supply chains and the Russian invasion of Ukraine are uppermost in our minds. We note some of the measures which are being introduced by other jurisdictions to tackle global macroeconomic challenges. For example, we note Barbados, but of course, I've discussed that when I open. But there are other issues that come with granting relief, and so we have to be balanced in our approach. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the midterm budget statement is an accurate, true, and fair reflection on the current state of the public finances. I'm grateful for and proud of the work of the many public servants who have supported us in its productions, and I commend it to the House.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, it is very disappointing that the Prime Minister was wilting under pressure and thought to use terms that were so unparliamentary in terms of, I won't dignify them by repeating them, and I know your recall is very good. You have a very good memory. You have a very good memory. So I'd like to begin, Mr. Deputy, with the first point being made by the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador about failure to report COVID spending. I think he has heard in this place and in other places, the Free National Movement leadership has made it absolutely clear that every administration, including the one that I was a part of, had an obligation to report, and we stand by that. We have no difficulty with that. I've said here and in other places that we had a duty to report. I made that point absolutely clear. Let me let me just jump ahead to help you out. You are in violation of the law, a law that has been passed and has come into force on the 21st of September. And no, what I am is somebody who understands the law, not as good as you, but I certainly understand it. And the Prime Minister said in this place that he has difficulties with the law. The regulations are not in place. This is what has been said by the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. When we demitted office, the regulations had been drafted. If the Prime Minister, if the Ministry of Finance, if the Attorney General Office had any difficulties with the regulations, they've had 6 months, Mr. Deputy, to complete the regulations. And furthermore, the regulations are not a prerequisite for complying with the Procurement Act. And in case any, Mr. Dickey will not yield. You have given us an opportunity. You have given us an opportunity. There is no point of order. There is no point of order. There is no point of order. Okay, well, Mr. Deputy, you gave us an opportunity.
1 second, hold on.
You gave us an opportunity.
Let me rule, Marco City.
My point of order.
There is
no point of order. There is no point of order.
Marco City,
a diatribe by the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Marco City, you have to let me rule.
Possible chance that
Marco
he's going to get up now.
Yeah.
No,
You have to be quiet so I can rule.
Let me ask a question.
You have to be quiet so I can rule.
Can I ask?
You have to be quiet so I can rule. For Charlie, can you give him 2 minutes to wrap up? I'm giving everybody 3 minutes, and that's it. So I'm going to give you listen.
Mr. Deputy, you made a commitment. You made a commitment that once the Prime Minister, the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador had completed, we would have an opportunity to address the issues that have been raised.
Members,
This member for Fort Charlotte, sit down and let the Prime Minister and myself have a conversation. You should sit down.
Okay, you have 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes, Marco City. You have the floor.
So hold on a second. You made a ruling earlier, Mr. Deputy, that the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador would make his point and we would be able to respond.
So you need more than 5 minutes?
No, I do not need more than 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, sir.
And so the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador suggested that the regulations were not in place. There were difficulties with the bill. The same act that I indicated was peer reviewed by a number of agencies locally and internationally. The government, the opposition then, voted for the Procurement Act. But here's what is interesting. There is no need for regulations in order for the government to comply with the Procurement Act. And for members of the public who are home listening, all we are asking the government to do is what the Prime Minister has been asking, which is that it's important to list all of the contracts that have been issued from the point that they came to power and this law came into effect. Why would the Prime Minister and the various entities of government be afraid of revealing all of the contracts and the terms that they have entered into since coming to government? The second thing is, the Prime Minister made a statement earlier that the Salvation Army, when you last spoke, that the Salvation Army was not involved in the food program. That is inaccurate. I would like to think that the information provided to the Prime Minister was wrong, but on his feet in this place, he indicated that certain organizations like the Salvation Army were not involved. That's untrue. Yes, you did. Ask for the Hansard. Secondly, that's important, and I think you should get the Hansard because he said it on his feet. Secondly, that no government official was involved in the food program. That is also inaccurate. The ministry that the member for West End and Bimini is in, I am certain he is able to find record of persons who participated in the meetings, inclusive of the former director who has retired, and that members of the Ministry of Health staff was also involved in the food program. So it is inaccurate. 3 points made by the Prime Minister, it's inaccurate. The fourth point is faith-based organizations were in fact involved in the food distribution program. So it is absolutely untrue that they were not involved in the food program. Furthermore, the Prime Minister has access to documents. So this suggestion of malfeasance, suggestion of wrongdoing, we don't have to keep talking about it. You have the Attorney General's office, you have the Ministry of National Security. So at the end of the day, this dripping of information not yet verified is inappropriate. It only does a disservice to this government that needs help from the NGO community, which, by the way, internationally, NGO communities, they are also
37 seconds
to run operations. What happened? I can listen to you all. You all can't listen? Have a seat. Have a seat. Have a seat. Yeah, it's only a debate when you are making the point, but when we're making the
Marco
point.
City, you have 20 seconds.
You're hurt. I understand
Members.
I understand you're hurt. I understand you're hurt. But you're going to heal after this. Just pause for a moment. No, but pause for a moment. Also.
Okay. Now, Marco City. No. Marco City. No. Listen. I must tell you, you wasted enough time talking to them. I was watching the clock. No. You should not have been distracted. No. That's not my problem. Now, listen. The chair recognizes the member for St. Anne's. Are you okay? Because I'm going to give you 3 minutes, and that's it. Because we had enough.
Not on vacation, it is an absolute lie told by the PLP. They continue to govern.
Start the clock. Start it over. Okay.
I have a point of order, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and it relates to Rule 3317 and the Prime Minister's words when he said that they passed the Procurement Act months before the election, and I expect they intended, if elected, to come back and change it in some way to favor them. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, by Rule 3317, imputations of improper motives and personal reflections on members shall be dealt with by the chair. And that is an imputation of improper motives by the previous administration made by the Prime Minister, and I ask that they be expunged from the record, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You, sir. Gentleman from Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. Against the administration.
Against the administration.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. The chair recognizes the honorable member for.
It says,
You are less interested in the truth than in going home.
the rule before Mr. Deputy Speaker,
Very undemocratic.
by 3317, imputations of improper motives and personal
Members, Marco City.
on members. So that's an imputation of improper motives on members
Members.
of the F&M administration under the last government. Members, plural. I ask that it be expunged, those comments from the Prime Minister's, from his contribution to today's debate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many as in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. It has been moved and seconded. The motion has been carried. The midterm budget report is adopted.
Mr. Deputy.